It's time now for a look at the day's top business news with Brian Quinn. Now, Brian, you're starting with the latest on the cryptocurrency markets. This as Elon Musk continues to move them on the stroke of a tweet, this time with what was once an internet inside joke, Dogecoin.
Absolutely. Not so much of a joke anymore. Earlier this week, you may remember the Tesla chief sent Bitcoin's value tumbling when he tweeted that Tesla would no longer be accepting it as payment. Well, his latest tweet says he's now working with Dogecoin's developers to improve its efficiency. Dogecoin, of course, the once jokey meme cryptocurrency that has turned quite serious after gaining around 12,000% in value over the past year, in part on public support from Musk. It's currently up around 47% to trade about 56 cents each. Now, Doge took a big hit earlier this week after Musk called it a, quote, hustle during an appearance on Saturday Night Live. Its latest rebound also being helped, though, by major crypto exchange Coinbase, which says it's going to start offering trading support for Doge in the coming weeks. Musk's tweets have led to growing concern over the ethics and legality over his obvious power on crypto markets. Plenty of long-term backers are less than thrilled about it. Take a listen.
Behind all of this, there is a community of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, who actually is focused on building the future of finance and making sure that that will be acting in your best interest instead of just showing up on SNL or being able to have a lot of Twitter followers or whatever else.
Next, Facebook has lost a major legal battle in Ireland. The country's High Court rejecting the social network's attempt to block Ireland's Data Protection Commission from investigating and possibly suspending the transfer of Facebook user data from the EU to the US. Last year, the EU's top court struck down an agreement allowing for privileged access to European data by American companies, saying that it didn't adequately protect EU citizens from US government surveillance. Well, Facebook has called those data transfers critical to its business model. The decision could have major implications for other US tech giants that have their European headquarters in Ireland, notably Google and Twitter. On to Madrid next, where Friday saw protesters gather outside the headquarters of CaixaBank. Demonstrators demanding an end to evictions and more help for struggling families. Despite the extension of a legal moratorium on evictions during the pandemic, foreclosure requests actually rose by more than 17% in 2020. CaixaBank is now Spain's biggest lender after buying rival Bankia last year. Activists are calling on the company to return bailout funds given to Bankia in 2012 so that it can be put towards rent relief.
I'm lucky to have a house and a job, but I'm angry because the banking system in Spain is the most unjust in the world. Apart from the fact that housing is impossible to maintain on one salary, when people get evicted, I don't understand why the banks keep the house and people have to pay the debt for life.
Time now for a check on the day's trading action. Wall Street rebounded for the second day in a row after a big sell-off on Wednesday. A lackluster retail sales report failing to hold back major indexes as tech shares recovered, the Nasdaq closing up some 2.3%. The travel sector in particular seeing a big bounce from that latest loosening of mask-wearing guidelines in the U.S. European indexes closed strong as well after a rough week amid global fears that rising inflation could lead to a tightening on loose monetary policy. Jobless claims on the continent fell to a 14-month low as London finished the day up 1.1%. The CAC 40 here in Paris and the Frankfurt DAX up around 1.5% at the close. Next, while the pandemic has been a huge blight on many commercial sectors, there are some that have not only escaped unscathed but have actually managed to toast their success. Here in France, with bars closed, neighborhood wine merchants have seen their cups runneth over, as Luke Schrager reports.
Franck Jaboulé has been a wine merchant for 30 years. He doesn't yet know if 2021 will be a good vintage just yet, but one thing he's sure of. With 10 to 15% above normal levels, it's been a bumper year for sales so far.
C'est assez inédit pour cette période, parce qu'habituellement, les mois de février et mars sont assez calmes. Et là, on travaille très bien actuellement.
With a curfew in effect and bars and restaurants closed, thirsty clients are turning elsewhere, and wine merchants are ready to pick up the extra custom.
J'ai 2-3 souvenirs dans l'année de m'être fait plaisir avec des bouteilles en se disant bon bah voilà, on va pas au restaurant, on va pas on va se faire plaisir avec une très belle bouteille, peut-être qu'on n'avait pas l'habitude de faire avant.
More than that, new customers are also discovering the wealth of information and advice that specialists in the industry have to offer.
On boit pas forcément plus, mais on choisira des bonnes bouteilles.
Before the pandemic, the commercial balance with wine merchants between restaurants and private individuals was 60-40. That ratio has been turned on its head and helped limit losses.
On a 50% de l'activité grossiste-restaurant qui est en baisse au minimum. Et à côté de ça, effectivement, la partie caviste, elle, pour les particuliers, a plutôt bien fonctionné.
Weekend sales in particular are up, with merchants noticing new younger clients, ones they want to try and keep coming back.
There's some more of the day's top business headlines we're following for you at this hour. French water and waste management giants Veolia and Suez have agreed to a long-contested mega merger. Suez finally accepting the takeover at €20.50 per share. That's up from Veolia's original offer of €18. The new company says it plans to be a global leader in helping firms and cities reduce their environmental impact. Britain's Serious Fraud Office has launched an investigation into the business empire of Liberty Steel owner Sanjeev Gupta. The probe is targeting fraudulent trading and money laundering, including links to Greensill Capital, the supply chain finance firm that collapsed earlier this year. The UK's Financial Conduct Authority is already investigating Greensill's collapse as, quote, potentially criminal in nature. And a French subsidiary of Toshiba says it was hacked by the same criminal group that shut down America's largest gasoline pipeline. The Japanese industrial giant said a minimal amount of work was lost and that client data was not accessed. The Wall Street Journal, meanwhile, is reporting that the hackers known as DarkSide are apparently shutting down their operations, citing disruption from law enforcement and U.S. pressure. Finally, for business, a push for greater gender equality in French boardrooms. France's National Assembly this week approved the new draft law that requires companies with more than 1,000 employees to have women as 30% of its senior management by 2027 and 40% by 2030. Left-wing parties were somewhat critical of the bill for not going far enough, while they did still lend it their support. The country's Minister for Gender Equality, Elizabeth Moreno, called quotas necessary to counter inequalities deeply ingrained in French mentalities, saying that in many respects society here remains patriarchal, sexist, and discriminatory. The new law heads to the Senate next for final approval. Probably plenty of people who would perhaps agree with that assessment by Elizabeth Moreno. See how that
potential
all goes.
for progress, yeah. Thank you, Brian Quinn, with the business news. It is time now for a short break, but do stay tuned. I'll be back in just a few minutes with more world news.